When making bread, it's important to know which flour is the best for bread. In this case, it's strong flour, and pretty much just says bread flour there anyway. But the idea is that it is strong. It's a strong white, or you can get a strong brown, wholemeals, and so on. The idea being that this has got a lot of gluten in there, and gluten is a protein that's found within flour that helps it become that helps flours and doughs become stretchy and elastic, and it allows the bread to hold its shape, to not allow those gases to escape that's being produced by the yeast and so on, and helping it to be nice and airy and light and fluffy inside. The thing is, being that this has got a lot of gluten in it, and then it goes further, and then it gets less as we go through the process of other flours. So here we have plain flour, which doesn't have as much gluten in there. And is more for your softer products like biscuits and some cakes and so on. So it's softer. There's not a lot of gluten in this one, whereas this one is very high in gluten. So good for bread, not so good for bread. And then here, I don't have the actual packet for it, but here we have self-raising flour, which is usually the blue packet. So you have the red ones, which are mainly plain flour in the UK, and then the blue ones, which are self-raising. So this is essentially that. So it is essentially plain flour, but it has baking powder added to it, which essentially is this. So if you have baking powder, let's swap my camera here. So baking powder plus plain flour equals self-raising flour. Yeah. So what I've got here is I've got my bread flour, and in here I've got 250 grams in there. I'm going to be making. I've decided to make dough balls with my yeast mix that I was making before, my fermenting yeast. So with my bread flour in there, I'm going to add some salt. So you use about like 5 grams. 5 grams being about a teaspoon. I'm going to kind of guess it really. So about 5 grams in there. And then I make a well. And that well being that you can put liquid in there and slowly bring the liquid together from the middle. And then slowly incorporate that flour into it. So I've made a nice well in there. And then into that well, as you can see, what's happened here with this yeast, can you believe that? Look how much that's grown. You can see, like, literally it's half the water in the bottom there, and then all of this lovely fermenting yeast on the top. So you can, all that lovely air. So that's that carbon dioxide and the alcohol that's being given off from the sugar feeding on that yeast. So we're going to add all that lovely stuff in there. Put it all in there. And then we're going to mix that together with a fork. And then come back and I'll show you how we're going to knead it. So I'm bringing it together with the fork. And I'm bringing it, so where I've made that well, it's all going into the middle there, slowly but surely. So I'm just bringing it in every now and again and giving it a stir in the middle. And the idea being from this is that we're going to go until we can't go any further, and then we're going to have to knead it, because there's only so far that this is going to go with the amount of liquid that's in there. It's got to a point where I've been working it in the bowl, and I can feel a slight stick to it. That slight stick is good. It's a good thing to have that slight stick. You do not want this too dry. I don't know if anyone's had bread that's too dry, but this is the stage where you do not want it to be too dry, because your loaf will be too dry. When it gets to this point, we then need to take it out. Anything left in that bowl, also put out to the side. So you can see I've got a nice empty bowl, nothing left in there, put to one side. And then this stage we're going to do now is called kneading. Now this kneading process is very important, in that is activating that gluten, which is in this flour, this strong flour, and making it stretchy and elastic. So we're going to work it. So by that video that I've posted online with Jamie Oliver, he's saying to rip it, really work it. And this is essentially how you're ripping and working it. So the way that I would do it is like you're ripping this dough slowly and pushing it against the table, and basically activating that gluten, which we want it stretchy and elastic. And by, I think at this stage I can show you, by that stretchy and elastic, you can see already if I do this, you see that slight pullback? That's the gluten working. That slight pullback, that's the gluten working. And that's what we want. So stretching and working. And we do this for about 10 minutes. If you need to add flour, but this has just got that slight stick, and that's good for me. That's how I know that that loaf is going to be nice and soft inside. So don't add too much. So this has just got that slight stick, stretching, moving, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. So we've been working this for about 5 minutes now, and you can see that slight pullback in terms of the gluten having worked. It's nice and smooth, it's elastic, it's just got that nice texture to it. It reminds me how much I really love making bread. It's one of my favourite things to make. And once you've made your dough, last things, for it to just need this thing, this part called proving. So to start this proving process, which I'll talk about in a second, bit of oil, not loads. All it needs to be is just like a little bit of oil in the pot or the bowl or whatever you're using, just to make sure that it's just not sticking. That's all, because if you don't oil it, it's going to be a hell of a time getting that out. And then after that, lovely bit of cling film. Great for the bread, not so good for the environment, but needs must. And you're going to wrap that in its cling film. And then what you're going to do with this, also you can use a warm tea towel. I do prefer cling film myself just because it does retain that nice warmth in there. So we're going to get this warm again. The idea being that now we're giving it warmth and we're giving it time. So remember, we've given it the yeast food so that it can feed upon, so that it can activate and help it to rise. We've given it warmth and we're giving it time, and we've given it its moisture. All these 4 things are needed for yeast to work, or for microorganisms to work anyway. So bacteria and so on, it needs these 4 conditions. So we're going to give these 4 conditions. We've already given it some, we're going to give it again. So now we're going to give it time, and we're going to give it some warmth. We're going to come back in about an hour or so. It might take less time because we've given it the right conditions, and then it will double in size. So what's happening in here now, or what will happen, is that it will become warm and the yeast will work again. It will start producing more carbon dioxide again. It will produce alcohol again and help this to prove and to double in size. And by double in size, you'll see what happens when we come back. As you can see from here, it's doubled in size. So where it's doubled in size, this is where all the air has got in there. The yeast has worked, and you can see, if I take this up, see all those lovely air holes that are in there. So it feels softer, it feels smoother, especially with that with the oil that's in there as well. It's made it that nice smoother dough. You could really smell it as well. It's really coming through. So now it's had its proof. So we've knocked the air out of it, and this is where you can shape it however you wish. You can shape it into plats, you can shape it into dough balls, as I'm going to do, or into loaves, or however you would want to. This is the stage where you shape it, and once you've shaped it, you prove it again. And once you prove it again, to double in size again, that's where you would cook it. And then we'll get to that stage. So it's had its first prove, developed flavour and so on. It's got nice and softer, and now we're going to make it into those dough balls. So I've divided these up individually into lovely little dough balls, and now I'm going to wrap them again in cling film, and they're going to prove again till they're double in size, which you'll see, and then we can bake them off. So now they've doubled in size again. So we've given it a second prove, meaning that we've given it time to rise again. We've shaped it to how we want it to be shaped. You can give it a little prod as well when it's had its second proof, just to see that it's had that little bit of more air produced by the yeast that's still working. This yeast is fed off the sugars. It's had all these, it's had time, it's had moisture, it's had warmth, it's had food, all these things it's needed to make this work, to help this bread to rise. This yeast has had in order for it to help this dough essentially to rise. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this into the oven for about 5 minutes or so, because they're only small. So for about 5 minutes, and then we'll see the results. So I've had these in for about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, but then my oven is not fantastic. But you can see like they've got that nice golden brown on the top. Before they go in, you have the option to put a bit of egg wash on there or a bit of milk, give it a bit more shine. But these are your basic dough balls. And then I know that they're not only because they've got that nice golden brown, they're risen, they feel nice and light. They don't feel stodgy, they don't feel too heavy. They've got that nice lightness to them. And you can hear as well, just by tapping them, you have that nice hollow sound. They feel a bit hard on the outside, but the more you leave them just to kind of rest and soften, they will become a lot more softer. But that nice hollow sound tells me and indicates to me that they've risen. They've got that nice fluffiness on the inside. I'm even gonna break one open right now without hopefully burning my hands too much, because they have literally just come out of the oven. And you can see how much they have risen. So you can see that nice fluffiness there. Look how nice and fluffy they are. And that's the yeast that's done that. The yeast has been, as it's risen and produces carbon dioxide, it's all been caught up. That's what those little holes are in there. That's trapped carbon dioxide, and it has that fantastic smell. And I'm definitely going to get brownie points when the other half comes home. And essentially, that's your dough ball right there. That's how yeast works. That's how we get those nice fluffy textures when using a biological raising agent known as yeast.